fishing friends and ailing addicts. It's me, Cricket.
And I'm Charlie Weinpearl here at Bridgemaster Fishing Products in Lake Wales, Florida. Today we're going to talk a little bit about flipping jigs, Miss Cricket. Something that you've been working on this past year.
Yes, and I actually really enjoy flipping.
Yeah, exactly right. Why would you flip a jig?
Well, you need to flip a jig so you can get it down and in where they're hiding, like when it's really hot.
Okay. It's a good summertime pattern?
Yes.
Okay. What else?
And you need to get it down there so you can get a reaction bite as well.
Okay, yeah. Tell me some of the things that you would flip into. Like if we're on Lake Kissimmee, what's some of the cover that you're looking for?
Well, you have pads, mats, reeds, I don't know. There's
grass.
Grass.
Cattails. All excellent places to flip a jig. We're going to talk a little bit about different flipping jigs, but we're mainly going to talk about the trailers, the equipment you need to use, the kind of chunks or trailers you put on the back of them. We're going to start out with sizes. They generally come half, 3/4, or 1 ounce. And like Cricket said, a lot of times we'll start out with the lightest jig as we can get away with, but we may have to change as the cover gets thicker or we're looking for that reaction bite. And Cricket's absolutely right. Sometimes they just will not hit a 1/2 ounce jig, so we go to a 3/4 or a 1 ounce so that it'll fall a little bit quicker to make that fish bite even though he doesn't want to. Now, one of the most popular jigs that we sell here at Bridgemaster Fishing Products, our #1 selling jig is a jig manufactured here in Central Florida by Mr. Joe Medlock. He is the flipping guru here in Central Florida. These are called Medlock double weed guard jigs, and as you can see in this particular one here, the word double weed guard simply means he's got 2 separate weed guards built into all of his jigs. This particular one here is called Clear Choice. And the reason it is because he uses a piece of clear fluorocarbon as a weed guard. He's got some that have the standard bristle guard and some that he uses in an industrial strength weed eater line for the weed guard. Now I have to tell you, Cricket, I've been using this particular jig about a year now. And you know, I told Mr. Medlock when he come in here one day, we were talking jigs, and he asked me, what jig do you like? And I'll be honest with you, I was using a Strike King Hack Attack. And he says, you know what, try my jig. And I'm going to tell you some things that I found out that I really like about Mr. Medlock's jigs. One, they are hand-built. Mr. Joe ties every one of these. He pours the lead. He puts in the hooks. He uses nothing but first-class materials to build all his jigs. He doesn't shortcut anything, so they're all perfectly designed. And if you notice, that particular jig, when it hits the bottom, it stands up like that, okay? And I'm going to tell you what Mr. Joe told me one time. The best way to fish his jig is drag it and fish it slow. Now, what makes a flipping jig is one of the same things that you do with a swim jig. It's all about the trailer. So we're going to look at a few trailers. One that's been around a long time, a lot of people like to use. This is a net bait pocket crawl. And as you can see, if we thread this on there, you've got a really large bait. Now this particular bait here, I like in the summertime on Lake Kissimmee when the fish are real aggressive and they're in the grass. I like a really large profile. One of my all-time favorite trailers, this is actually called an Ugly Otter by Gambler, and I actually thread this one on here, and it makes the bait just a little bit smaller, but as you can see, it's still a big mouthful. I use this a lot of times during the summertime. Now, Mr. Joe Medlock and his son Brandon, their all-time favorite, and this thing here is older than dirt. This is a Zoom chunk, and what it looks like is the old Uncle Josh pork rinds that's before your time. They used to actually make these out of pork, and we used to get them in little jars that were filled with liquid, and in there would be 6 of these pork chunks. Well, you can't get them anymore, so Zoom decided we're going to make a plastic one. So I'm going to show you something Mr. Medlock does. He will actually, you know what I need? I need a piece of sink or a little piece of worm. I'm going to show you a little secret that they do and why they do it. You happen to have... You have a worm? Cricket, would you bite me off about 1 inch of that, please? If you would, the other end, please. Thank you. Awesome. Listen, did you have to put so much spittle on it, Cricket?
You asked.
Yes, I did. Be careful what you ask for, Charlie. Okay, as you can see, I'm threading this awful wet piece of worm up on this
Gross,
jig,
Charlie.
and I'm going to show you why. It's actually, we're using it as a spacer, because what we'll do is with a chunk, we'll take this particular chunk and we'll simply poke a hole through it to where what you have is a bait that looks just like that. All right? And what we do, we put this on here to keep this from riding up. Now, you see the length of this particular bait? Now, I'm going to show you what's nice about a Zoom chunk. There are times when you flip this particular bait, they're being a little picky and they don't want to bite. So you now have an option of pulling off the very wet little spacer that we just put on here. Try not to lube them up so much next time, Cricket, if you could. Then what you do is you take this particular chunk, and look here. I just threaded it up on here, and look what happened.
It's even smaller.
Yeah, you see how much smaller it got, how much more compact that bait is? There are times when that makes all the difference in the world. Now, when I thread one up like this, the other thing that I'll do, I'll trim back a little bit of the skirt so that I see a little bit more of my trailer. But that's what's nice about a Zoom chunk. This is actually the big chunk right here, a super chunk.
Super chunk.
They make a smaller version that I'll use a lot of times when the water's really cold on Kissimmee. I've been using this particular chunk here for probably 20 years. This is actually...
That's older than me.
That is older than you, Cricket. This is a smaller version right here. So if I'm using a little bit smaller jig, like say a 1/4 ounce jig, maybe a 1/2 ounce jig, I'll go to that particular chunk right there. I'm going to tell you another little secret that I do, and if Mr. Joe Medlock, you're looking at this video, I know you're fixing to cringe every time I do it, but I take a pair of pliers and I actually open that hook up a little bit. I'm going to tell you why I do. You can open up the hook and still stay within the weed guard so it's totally weedless, but what happens is with the hook leaning up a little bit, it gets in the top of their mouth every time. I don't miss near as many fish if I open that hook up just a little bit, all right? He uses nothing but the best products on the market, so you don't have to worry about taking a pair of pliers and open the hook up a little bit. It won't bother the hook one bit. All right, so let's talk a little bit about line. What do you think, Cricket? What would be really important line to use if you're flipping jigs?
Well, I mean, you either need to use braid, which is highly recommended.
Absolutely.
Or you can use like 20-pound fluorocarbon.
Okay, we're going to talk about that in a second. As you can see right here, probably our most popular one here at Bridgemaster Fishing Products is Power Pro. But there's a new player on the block. Seaguar makes a specific flipping line. Now, pound test, I'm going to tell you generally here in Central Florida, and some people think it's overkill, we use a minimum of 65-pound test, and a lot of guys use 80. Because I'm going to tell you what, this is a hand-to-hand combat sport. We're not casting it, we're dropping it right beside the boat. A really big fish gets on, you've got to have really good line to winch him back up out of that cover. Okay, so let's talk fluorocarbon. Believe it or not, in the summertime, this is all I use. I use nothing but 20-pound Seaguar fluorocarbon. Let me tell you why. One of the things that I've learned the past couple of years experimenting it is, generally speaking, the big fish you're going to catch on Lake Kissimmee in the summertime are going to be grass-oriented. And the reason they're in the grass feeding on bluegill. And what does that thing look like going through the water column?
It looks like a bluegill.
It looks like a big old bluegill coming through the water column. So generally speaking, the cover's not as thick as, say, a mat. So I have found that I get more bites for two reasons. One's really obvious. Why do we use fluorocarbon?
They can't see it.
They can't see it. But I'm going to tell you another thing people don't think about, that the reason I like fluorocarbon over braid, it makes no noise. Now, if you've ever noticed, fluorocarbon sliding through any cover actually will make some form of noise where fluorocarbon does not. Now, here's a secret about getting a big fish out of heavy grass using fluorocarbon. You cannot panic. When you get a big fish on, you simply quit pulling, hold on, he will swim out. It's much easier getting an 8 or 9 pound bass out of the grass a lot of times than it is a little 1.5, 2 pound bass, because they're so bulky, they actually part the grass and they usually swim out. So summertime, you're going to see me on Lake Kissimmee flipping. I'm using nothing but fluorocarbon. Okay, so let's talk rods.
Rods.
What do you think? Can I get by using a spinning rod, flipping a big old heavy-duty jig?
No.
All right, so I know that you're very fortunate. You're sponsored by who?
I am sponsored by Reaper Rods.
And last time I looked, and I don't know why I don't have one, but you have a full set of rods that say Cricket with different specifications of rod.
Yes, I do.
You have one that says flipping.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so if you're like me, nobody loves you, and will give you a free rod that says flipping, I'm going to tell you what to look for when you come into Bridgemaster Fishing Products. You want a rod at least 7'6" in length, medium heavy action, we've got them extra heavy action, we've got 2X heavy action. We've got them up to 8 foot. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, for me personally, because I'm getting older, I use a 7'4" medium heavy rod because it's hard for me to flip all day as I've gotten older. But a lot of younger guys are going to use 7'6", and a lot of them using 8-foot rods. Better hook set, more leverage, you can get them up out of the cover. Now, I'm going to let you in on a secret that's what's helped, one thing that has helped my jig fishing the past year more than anything.
What?
High-speed reel. I'm going to tell you what I did. I've changed all my reels over to 8:1 gear ratio, and let me tell you why. I can take up the slack a whole lot faster when a fish eats a jig. Now, let me tell you what happens on Lake Kissimmee, and I'm going to take you this summer, and you're going to find out. We're going down the grass line parallel with the grass, and I'm pitching it in front of me to the little grass points. He will catch it on the way down, and before you can blink your eye, he's going as fast as he can. You've got to take up the slack to get a good hook set. In years past, we didn't have the option of 8-to-1 reels. We had 5-to-1 reels. So you had a tendency to lose fish because you couldn't run them down. Nowadays, with an 8-to-1 gear ratio, I don't lose very many fish on the hook set anymore. I'm able to get on top of them really quick. So there you go, guys. That's some of the things that I do when I'm flipping. These are the best handmade jigs here in Central Florida, available here at Bridgemaster Fishing Products in Lake Wales. What do you think, Cricket? You got any other questions? Do you understand a little bit more about flipping jigs?
I do.
All right, that's awesome. Well, listen, guys, for everything you see right here and more, check out Bridgemaster Fishing Products in Lake Wales, Florida.